Welcome to today's session called Creating Digital Solutions to Help People and Nature Thrive, Lessons from the Frontline. My name is Leila Guisi. I am the Insights and Advocacy Manager for GSMA ClimateTech program, and I was also part of the research team developing this report that we will be talking about today. So if I can ask Anna to go to the next slide, please. Fantastic, thank you. So for those of you who don't know us from before, the ClimateTech program is a part of GSMA's Mobile for Development team. And you can see that we are placed in the intersection of the mobile ecosystem and the development sector. And we work with innovation, and our focus is on low and middle income countries. And our main anchor, so to say, is our research, but we also work with local market engagement and advocacy, for example, through building partnerships and providing grants through our innovation fund. And the ClimateTech program works with topics such as the circular economy, but also with digital-enabled climate finance, which is an interesting topic that we'll also have a session on next week. So if you're interested in that webinar, then we will also pop a link into the chat. But today we will be talking about natural resource management. And I will shortly hand over to our first speaker. But before I do that, just a quick look at today's agenda. And we will first hear from our donor FCDO, which today is represented by Dr. John Hassel. And then my colleague Anna Kulhun will go over the findings from the research together with Varsha Ashok, from Basara, who was our research partner through this report. And then the report itself features a few deep dives on a few innovative solutions, and today we will hear from them directly. And we will start with John Trimarco from Fairtree, and then Ashok Jani from India Observatory, and then Burhan Yassin from Rainforest Connection. And after that there will be time for Q&A, and then there will be a session with Xiaoting Hu Jones from the REDAA program, who will be talking about a funding opportunity, and then Anna will be guiding us through the next steps. So just a quick housekeeping. I believe we will be recording this session. So if we can start the recording, that would be great, so that it will be available for you to go back to and share with your colleagues. And also to keep the questions in the chat, because we have such limited time. We have decided to keep the questions for the end, for the Q&A session. So we will be looking at the chat function throughout the session. So if you have any questions, just pop them in there and we will keep track. Okay, I think that was all from me. I will now hand over to Dr. John Hassel from FCDO for some opening remarks.
Thanks a lot, Leila. Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining today's session, whichever time zone you're joining from. I'm hoping it's not too early for some people. So I am the Environment Research Lead within the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and I'm the Senior Responsible Officer for the Reversing Environmental Degradation Africa and Asia programme, the REDAA programme that Leila just mentioned, which you'll hear more about at the end of today's session from my colleague Xiaoting from IIED. So technology has a huge role to play in our world, and it opens up vast opportunities for alleviating poverty for the world's poorest. Back in 2020, GSMA did a report on digital dividends in natural resource management, that looked across what technology is available for natural resource management, and it provided key insights on tech like environmental monitoring. However, one of the gaps that we felt within the REDAA team and we approached GSMA about was similar to recent questions like artificial intelligence. What we really need to know is how we should use this technology responsibly and how to use it in the best way for natural resource management. And that really importantly meant trying to look into how local people can be brought in from the very outset and involved in the decision-making process. For us at the FCDO, being locally led is increasingly a fundamental part of how we consider and approach not only natural resource management, but climate adaptation. And that's exemplified through things like the Adaptation Research for Impact Principles developed by the Adaptation Research Alliance, and the locally led focus that we're taking with the REDAA program that you'll hear more about from Xiaoting later. This important report outlines that the best practices for driving uptake of digital solutions from natural resource management have co-creation and partnership at our hearts, alongside ease of use and rewarding end users. You'll hear more today about the research finds and hear from really exciting and important case studies, which will provide a good insight into this thinking and why involving local people from the outset is so fundamental for good development. Digital and tech solutions are going to feature more and more in sustainable development, and we should all work to ensure that these solutions have people front and centre. The work of this report showcases practically how to account for this, and I really hope that you enjoyed today's session and find it engaging. Thanks so much, and I'll pass over to Anna.
Thanks so much, John. Next up is Anna and Barsha.
Thank you, Leila, as well. So, hi everyone, I'm Anna from the GSMA ClimateTech program, and alongside Barsha, we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the key findings from this latest report. But really, we want to allow most time and space to our case studies because they have lots of interesting stories to tell. But just to set the scene and explain a little bit about this particular piece, we all know that biodiversity loss is happening at a really alarming rate, and for generations, Indigenous people and local communities have been the primary caretakers of these natural resources that we all rely upon. However, at the same time, local communities are bearing the brunt of exploitative resource extraction, and they often receive a very small portion of the wealth that it actually generates. So in the last few years, we're seeing more and more innovative digital technology being used to address these different environmental and social issues. This can range from the use of big data to predict air pollution and restore mangroves, all the way through to the use of GPS or remote sensing to track and protect wildlife. We've also seen the development of some interesting initiatives that focus on empowering Indigenous people and local communities to map and protect their land rights. However, digital solutions in and of themselves are not a silver bullet. If the local communities can't directly benefit from these technologies that are being developed, or if they don't see the relevance to their daily lives, then ultimately the uptake and impact of these tools is going to be limited. As John mentioned, there was still a gap in terms of understanding how to improve the design and adoption of this innovative technology among local communities. And this is where our research began. So we wanted to understand what causes so many well-intentioned digital solutions to fail. And on the other side, how do some initiatives manage to scale and bring benefits across lots of different communities and contexts? So with these questions in mind and trying to address this evidence gap, the funding from the FCDO, the REDAA and GSMA programs partnered together to explore this topic, and Basara led on all the fieldwork. Just a note on what we did and what we have included in the report. So we started with a big desk review, picking up from our last GSMA study on the role of mobile digital technologies in natural resource management. And from there, we looked at the trends in the last few years and narrowed down into the 3 case studies that you'll be hearing more from today. And with the case studies, we really wanted to unpick the local nuances, the power dynamics, and the factors that contribute to some of the successes and failures of different digital solutions. And from there, we presented and concluded our best practices that you can find in the report. Barsha is now going to share some of the barriers that we identified before we then hear more from our case studies.
Thanks, Anna. So like Anna said, what we saw in talking to people from the organizations that you're about to hear from is that digital technology can help address inequalities in natural resource management when it's used well. But this can only happen if solutions take into consideration the local context in which they operate. So when this isn't taken into consideration, what it can do is exclude certain groups from the benefits that digital technology can bring to communities in terms of natural resource management. So with this in mind, we identified 4 common barriers that organizations face when they try to develop these solutions. The first one is structural barriers, which is a direct result of the macro environment in which communities live. So these can be things like poor internet connection, limited access to smartphones, and issues with cost of data bundles. For example, smartphone access can in some communities be concentrated among members who are either younger or male. And smartphone-based solutions may, in these cases, exclude harder to reach groups, which reinforce already existing inequalities. Technical barriers are limitation in the technology or the digital solution itself. So if a user feels like the technology is too complicated for them to use, or if it's too confusing, or if it can't be used without network coverage or internet connection, then there's likely to be lower uptake. Social barriers are a result of the existing relationships and norms that exist within a community. So norms are a way in which communities internally communicate. And these need to be considered because, especially when thinking about matters of penetration, it's important to understand the way that information flows and what power dynamics communities have within them. And finally, motivational barriers are a result of human tendencies to behave in certain ways. So these can include barriers like limited attention or personal circumstances or perceptions about technology or natural resources. The end user needs to properly feel that the solution is directly solving a problem in their daily lives in order for them to be motivated to use the solution. So before we move to the case studies, can we go to the next slide, please? We wanted to hear from you. What do you think businesses or practitioners should keep in mind when developing a digital solution for natural resource management? So you can scan the QR code or you can go to menti.com following the link that I'm going to put in the chat. And just type your answers in and we'll present the results at the end of the session. I think we can move on. John?
Thank you, Varsha and Anna. Now it's John Trimarco.
Hey, can you guys hear me? Great. Yeah, so I guess I'll introduce myself real quick. I am the founder of fairtree.org, which has pioneered the pay-to-grow system with some of our partners. I'm based here in Kenya and have been working in East Africa for the past few years. I'm coming at this from a natural resource practitioner standpoint, and so really the last few years have been an education, not only in just fintech and how to kind of mobilize technology for local communities, but just really the technology space in general. I never really thought I'd find myself quite here. So it's kind of exciting to be among so many awesome projects and just amazing people. So generally we're talking about restoration here, and generally restoration projects look a lot like this. Traditionally, the whole industry has been really focused on centralized, large-scale tree nurseries that are really easy to finance because, hey, you can take a picture of this nursery and send it to your donors, and they can kind of check a box saying, hey, it looks like they're going to go plant a lot of trees, and then you're kind of good to go. I think we're finding that there's some major limitations there. First of all, it ends up being very top down. Oftentimes you end up excluding communities that might be too far away or maybe don't know about the program, don't have the right connections. And it also means that you have this like mediator role of organizations that are doing the financing part. So it's very hard for locally led initiatives to ever even emerge in the first place if all the financing is going to larger scale projects. And it also means that it's excluding a lot of different ways to plant trees. So it's not just bagged seedlings, although that's an important way to do reforestation and restoration. It also means, there's a lot of other ways to do this sort of work. There's a lot of focus recently on natural regeneration, or small plantings or direct seeding, all of which have been really hard to capture or finance with the existing frameworks that are out there. I'm just seeing, I hope I'm still presenting. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. I think I'll have to say next slide. Looks like I can't present, yeah. So Fairtree is really built around technology from the get-go. And what we've really decided to do is focus less on how many trees we're planting, but really on the growers themselves and building a platform, not even a platform, a set of tools that enables growers to conceive of and lead their own initiatives. So this is my friend James. He's here in Samburu, Kenya. And this is really built around people like him. He's not going to be joining a Zoom call looking for financing for his project. He's not putting together pitch decks, but he's got really good ideas and he has a much better sense of what's going to work in his community than I do, or much less somebody in the US or somewhere. So we really want to make sure that we're building technology and systems that help him access those resources, but allow him to still be the main decision maker. Let's go to the next slide. So we've actually partnered with a group called Greenstand. They have developed an open source platform built around this app called the Tree Tracker, which is a very intuitive, simple to use geotagging app, essentially designed specifically for tree planting projects. It was actually emerged here in East Africa. And yeah, it's a simple app. So our process looks like once we've developed a project or onboarded a new group of growers, usually looking for kind of ideas coming from those communities themselves, we develop a pay-to-grow plan for them that's really focused on not only planting the trees, but also subsequent management of those trees. So people going back on a frequent basis. For a tree grower, it might feel a little bit like being an Uber driver, which I hope is a positive connotation, at least in this setting, where after they've gone and planted some trees, they go and they track those trees using the tree tracker. They upload a batch of those trees to us. Fairtree actually looks at each and every single image, and we approve which trees we think are actually legitimately planted according to the plans that we have laid out with those groups. And then we pay a small, a pre-agreed amount for the action that was taken. So in this case, some mangroves were planted, and so we had a pre-arranged amount that we would send per mangrove planted direct to the growers, and bypassing CBOs or other middlemen in the process. So going direct to the grower, going direct to the person who's planted that tree and is managing it. And then we'll have them go back, depending on their pay-to-grow plan, multiple times. That's okay. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. So we'll have them go back to those same trees over at least the first 2 to 3 years of that tree's life, because the point is to grow new forests, to grow more trees. It's not just to go and plant. We need to see that those trees are actually surviving and that they're actually benefiting the communities that we're trying to target. So once that's all uploaded, Fairtree goes and we make the payments. So we then connect through multiple different channels, through different mobile platforms to pay directly to those growers. And then the nice thing is too, we also have this nice map that shows each and every single tree at different time points that's geotagged. So it actually ends up being a nice kind of monitoring data set for us as well. Our partners at Greenstand who developed this system also are developing token systems. So there might be some really cool ways that we can start to finance this more directly on a tree by tree basis as we go forward. Yeah, next slide. So we work with a wide range of groups. We're in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. We've only planted around 250,000 trees so far. So we're really focusing on testing out this concept in a broad range of contexts. So a lot of the work we do is with regenerating acacias in Kenya. We also work with refugees in northern Uganda, planting timber trees, high elevation plantings in northern Tanzania, all the way to mangroves on the coast. So we're really testing out this pay to grow concept and seeing what kind of projects people come up with in different places. But there's still barriers. Of course, you know, some of the structural ones that were mentioned earlier, access to smartphones. I think for us, the biggest is traditional project-based way of doing things. A lot of these communities are accustomed to NGOs coming in with like a prescribed plan and certain amounts of funding directly for that plan. And so this is really saying, no, you're in the driver's seat. The success and scale of your project is really dependent upon you. And so there's a bit of a learning curve for that. And of course, there's things like transaction costs and things like that, which I think are improving generally. So it means that we are starting to get more and more people involved. Next slide. So best practices. Tech is useful for managing, but it's much better for empowering. So I think there's a lot of really cool solutions that have been developed in the past few years, but a lot of them are really, they seem to be more for making the management side of things easier, the data management easier, the reporting easier, which of course is a really important function of this sort of technology, but we need to focus on who we're serving, right? We're serving the people on the ground who are doing the actual work. So for Fairtree, we're really trying to limit as much as possible our overhead and give the lion's share of the funding to the crew leaders and the growers on the ground, making this stuff happen. And that also means that the technology that we're developing with our partners needs to be focused on their experience and not on making my job easier. It just, yeah, a lot of approaches end up doing this the opposite way. And I think that ends up really being a major cause for things not going so well. I would also say, just if you're dealing with fintech, build redundant transfer pathways at every level and in every country. That's going to have to be adapted to different contexts. You know, there's constant flux in terms of which service allows you to make transfers and which one doesn't. I think the space is still kind of complex in that way. So build redundant pathways for making payments, because you got to pay your people on time. Otherwise, they're going to lose trust in your system. For us, we're emphasizing quality over quantity. I'd rather employ one person well than distribute money to 20 or 200 people, one time. I'd rather have dedicated, committed tree growers who are learning over time and enhancing the quality of the program for everybody else. And yeah, tech should be simple and it should be fun to use for them. They should enjoy the process they should enjoy their work, right? Next slide. Recommendations. Don't build your own fintech system. That's already been done. There are a lot of really great systems out there. We're really advocating for a partner-driven approach. If you want to connect nature-based solutions to finance, there's a lot of pathways to do that. A lot of really great actors in the space. I might also add, if your solution is very platform-focused, see if you can turn that more into a tool, something that's really useful for the people on the ground. There already are a lot of platforms, and I think they come with a lot of really great intentions, but a lot of times they actually end up becoming, the platforms become barriers to entry for people, even though they were often designed to break through those barriers. So I'd say really focus on building tools that are directly useful for the people on the ground. Again, for us, we came in this as natural resource people. Don't be afraid to start manually. If you look behind the scenes, even the biggest kind of fintech operators out there, you'll see hamsters running on wheels. A lot of the transfers still go through manual processes or oversight, and that's not going to be any different for organizations like ours. You're going to have manual parts of it that you eventually automate piece by piece over time. But better to start on the ground, getting feedback from the communities that you're serving to make sure that the technology you have is really kind of co-designed by those groups, than to try and create the optimal system and then deploy it. That might work a lot in Silicon Valley for the newest, sleekest, consumer-driven app, but it really doesn't work for community development or natural resource management. It really has to come from the ground up. And of course, work with those communities to experiment, iterate, and be patient. It's going to change. You're going to have to pivot. It's more of a journey when you're doing this sort of work, even if you have a big technology component. I'll just close with saying, this picture I think encapsulates what we're trying to achieve with Fairtree. It's focusing on the growers. It's young people figuring out, learning new ways to restore their own landscapes, and getting some easy way to be funded to do that. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you so much, John. That's really interesting. I'm seeing questions coming in on the chat. Just a reminder that we will do the questions in the Q&A at the end. Also, we're starting to run behind a little bit on the time, so let's try to keep our allocated times for all the speakers. Thank you so much. Next up is Ashok Yani from India Observatory.
Yeah, friends, it's greetings from FES India Observatory to all. And yes, this is the case for democratizing the natural resource management case through water conservation kind. So next slide, please. Hello. Yeah. So what John has mentioned a very good essence about how to build the project and whom to involve into entire life cycle. Yes, this is a picture of a person sitting on a village on ground and trying to understand the geohydrology and rechargeability around the area. And this system, here some figures are given that is being shown for a usage across India. We are working in India. So the solution is geospatial solution that is technologically helpful to understand. Next. Yeah, to make it simpler for the ground user, the science has been decoded or demystified into colors. So if the data of particular location is downloaded onto a mobile by a user, he or she may see this kind of colors on their mobile devices. So here the meaning of those colors are given into the legends. So if green is there, then this area is a good recharge area. If yellow is the color, then this is a moderate recharge area. Purple is indicating for conservation kind of activity. Blue is high runoff zone for water. And red is a no recharge, is a surface storage area. So based on this area or color, they should select the water, soil moisture, water conservation structure. So this tool is helping in planning on the ground what kind of water structure to be built by deciding the location. So this is about someone has planned and uploaded the data onto the portal, and this is, you can see some of the details. You can see the screenshot of a mobile showing a person standing at a GPS point, and that point is a red zone on the left side. And on the right side, it shows the detail, what it is and what it is planned. It is planned a step type farm pond, and farm pond is a surface storage area. So you can see that analogy that the person is standing on a red zone, and it is a farm. So this is a surface storage structure built on the area, and this is a cross section which is planned for that surface storage farm pond kind of activity, and their estimates and everything can be drawn out from the platform. Could you move on to the next slide? Yeah, the previous two slides shows the users and how user uploads the plan and can see the detail about their plan. But this is about really coordinating at the learning, monitoring and evaluation side at the higher level. So this is a widget of a Meghalaya state, and across the Meghalaya, these people are using this tool. With the government, this tool is aligned with a government program, and the sitting in an office, a top level people can see that green, yellow, red kind of portion, and when they click a program, they enable the program through that button given on the right side, they can see all the structures planned under that program. And when they focus on one of the structure, it gives a, you can see a middle square, and that square just describe about what kind of plan the person has proposed from the ground. Whether it is a recharge zone or whether it is based on that, the person sitting in the office in a government program can approve that. So this is about completing a cycle. Yes, challenges always when you go for a scaling this kind of solutions. Challenges are similar to what John has explained. Inequality to access it because of structural issues, reachability by the infrastructure, or it might be a financial thing involved in data transfer cost. There are some social things also. The women may get less access to the smartphone compared to men. Maybe young people are techno savvy than traditional people of a previous generation. So it is in the hand of the young people. So all these are there. Inequality is a challenge. How to overcome those challenges is a question. Technical capacity. So if a program is in a large scale, how can you build a capacity to such a huge mass? Here we are talking about a Meghalaya state, but when we talk about this tool is adopted by 5 states. So the capacity building of real on-ground people for using this tool is a big challenge. So yes, this is a case. Local governing systems. So how socially people adapt? What are the social dynamics into that? What is the relation of those local community with the administration and governance, and how these tools will be adopted by the local community? Balancing short-term and long-term incentives, because when the on-ground people have a lots of issues for their livelihoods and other issues, and if we are showing the benefit of a long term, say if I say after 10 years your water table will be recharged and your water would come up, I doubt this generation will accept this tool. So we have to go slightly with a smart way to tell about a short-term benefit and a long-term benefit. The benefit around the easy processes, or we are shortening the time to prepare a plan and apply the things, those kind of things. So these are the challenges. Yes, incentives are.
Ashok, can I just jump in? I'm so sorry. Just in the interest of time, would you be?
Yeah.
Is it possible for you just to focus on some of your recommendations?
Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So these are the recommendations about the things. There are 3 Ds: democratize, demystify, and disseminate. It's aligned with the 3D of GSMA. Discover, develop, and deliver kind of thing. We are saying first mile because the natural resources are most close with the rural people and the people on ground. So they are the first mile. So if you want to design a solution, first mile thinking is the key. We have to value the local indigenous knowledge and not only the science, then the adaptability will go up and some undiscovered science also can be included. And the open data platform, so data collected should be open to take by any other good minded people so that they can bring out another analysis, another valuable tools and all the things. Next. Yeah, partnership is the key. It's a collaborative efforts and some hands are free here. So anyone would like to contribute? Yes, welcome. So this is the message. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ashok. That's really interesting. In the interest of time, I will jump quickly into the next speaker, which is Boran from Rainforest Connection.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leila. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Borhan Yassin. I'm the CEO of Rainforest Connection. I'll go through this real quick so we can give more time for the Q&A session. So Rainforest Connection is a nonprofit organization. We primarily focus on using sound, acoustics, to study biodiversity by detecting species through AI and also monitor for illegal activities. So we create this device called the Guardian, which you'll see in just a few seconds, that could detect illegal logging, poaching, mining in real time. The project that was subject to the study of what we're talking about here was one of our projects in Sumatra. We work with a local partner called KKI Warsi, and it's protecting several villages that have been overrun by illegal logging. And we use the Guardian platform to detect illegal logging in real time and alert the patrol people on the ground in order to go and stop it. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Guardian system. The Guardian is a device that gets installed on top of the tree canopy. You'll see a picture of it in just a second. It is connected via GSM. It is connected via low Earth orbit satellites. So it can be installed practically anywhere. It has a range of almost 7 square kilometers, 1.5 kilometers in every distance. It records the entire soundscape 24/7. It uses machine learning and AI on the device itself to analyze that sound and be able to pick out very specific signatures. So we can pick out sounds of chainsaws, which are indicative of illegal logging and so on. And we can alert people in real time as soon as we make these detections. So some of the challenge, we've been doing this for now over 12 years. So we've learned a lot. This device started from a recycled cell phone that we used to get donated from all over the world. And we put the cell phone in a box, strap some solar panels to it to now a full-on custom device that we've been iterating on for several years. So some of the challenges that we've had is installation. Again, we have to climb up a tree, go up 150 feet, 30, 40 meters up the tree to install this device. When we started out, it was pretty technical to install it. Over the years, we've improved that, and we created now a system that could be installed practically by people with very little technical skills, which allowed us to enable the local people on the ground to install it. Making the hardware work consistently in the forest in some of the harshest environments, you know, you have the humidity, you have the water, you have the tampering of animals, all those things. It's quite a challenge. Takes lots of iterations. Takes a lot of learning from the ground to make that happen. Lots of social barriers. We work in 35 countries around the world. This Guardian device is installed in 15 of those 35 countries. Lots of local nuances. Lots of things to navigate through. Lots of power dynamics depending on who we're talking to. So there's always these social barriers to look out for. Maintaining interest among end users. What that means is that if the technology is not working, one thing I'd like to say is the technology is useless unless it's used by the people. And if the technology is not solid, it doesn't work well. Like in our example, if our AI models were outputting false positives, quite a high number of false positives, we will lose interest of these end users. We will lose the confidence of these people. They'll stop using it. They're not going to tell us about it. They'll just simply stop using it. So having a device that could work, being very close to the the people themselves that are using the technology is very important, so you can ensure that you're maintaining that user interest. Next slide, please. So this is what the device looks like. It's actually, these are custom solar panels at a very specific angle to capture any rays of sunlight penetrating through the tree canopy. It's actually, the solar panels are modeled after the Cecropia tree, which is a quite a well-known species in the rainforest. So what are some of the incentives? So, you know, strong local partnerships. It's very important. Having partners on the ground is very important to navigate through some of those nuances that we've talked about earlier. Localization, right? That's also very important. As I mentioned, working closely with end users, understanding what they need. Our Guardian app, which the users use to get the notifications, we iterate on that constantly because we want to make sure that it can adapt to all the different nuances and all the different things that users need on the ground. And every community approaches responding to these alerts differently. Some go out immediately as an alert comes in. Others, they organize a big group and they go once a month. For example, the Tembe tribe in Brazil, that's what they do. Or the folks over in Sumatra, where the case study was, this happened. There are a bunch of villages. There are about 8 villages. Each of these villages have their own set of things that they do it. So being agile in your approach is very, very, very important. You can't take your time, or you can't, follow a strict guideline that you have within your organization if you want to make sure that you maintain that interest, if you want to make sure that you maintain the usage of your system and your technology on the ground. So having that agile approach is very important as well. Next slide, please. So finally, what are the recommendations? So, I think I've touched on these briefly, but listen to your users. That's the single most important thing. I think for us, it's extremely important to adapt our system to the needs of our partners. Like I said, and I'll say it again, if the technology is useless unless it's used, we care about the impact. We don't care about selling devices. That's not what we do. We're a nonprofit organization, so the impact is what matters the most to us. That's what we're judged on. So if people are not using the technology, then it makes, it could be the best technology in the world. It won't mean anything unless it's actually used by people on the ground to drive impact, to stop illegal logging and so forth. Establishing key partnerships. We go through an extremely rigorous process because, we're having partners from all over the world. We don't know what these partners are. We don't know exactly how good they are, if they're in a completely different country, et cetera, et cetera. We can't do a lot of background research on them. So establishing these key partnerships, going through a rigorous process to get really strong partners that will actually commit to delivering results is very important. And the third thing is and the last thing is being resilient and adaptable. And what I mean by that is, like, in the field, one of the things that I've noticed through all the years that I've been going to the field myself is that you can plan the best of plans in advance. The moment you land on the ground, it's a completely different story. Everything changes, the weather changes, the people on the ground schedule changes, who knows? All these things happen. So being resilient, because you're going to encounter a lot of obstacles, and being adaptable is extremely important when you're working in the field and trying to deploy technology in the field. And with that, thank you so much, and happy to answer any questions during the Q&A.
Excellent, thank you so much. I will hand over to Anna for the Q&A session.
Thanks, Leila, and thanks everyone. So we're seeing some questions coming in. I'm going to start with John. So there's a question about if you've experienced any cases of fraud, and if so, how you managed it, and also a question on the breakdown of the gender for your growers. And while you answer, I'm just going to refresh the slides in case people cannot see.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good question, especially on the fraud. I was really thrilled the first time we saw it because we spent, over a year or so trying to design our system with fraud, different types, like trying to imagine any way people might try to cheat the system. We haven't caught any fraud. I saw in the comment it was around like double counting of trees with another organization. We haven't really found any major cases, at least with Fairtree, of that happening. We've dodged a few projects where we've seen that there was a bit of that element, and we really tried to build around that to begin with. But there are, cases where people try to like double count a tree, and so we actually do evaluate them, and we have a team that goes through manually with the trees and makes sure that those sorts of things aren't happening. And if they are, we just have a good channel of communication with all of those growers. First time, it's kind of like, yeah, maybe you made a mistake, but we caught you. The system really works. And third or fourth time, it's like, okay, there's a pattern here, and then we'll bring someone else on board instead. Yeah, I'd say we're definitely majority male in our users for all the reasons people predict. Phone access, especially if you're working in rural areas in Africa. The reality is, people with more opportunities often are male, so there's kind of a natural filter that comes our way. So we try to be really proactive about that, especially bringing on female leaders. And I do think that generally we are seeing a shift. I mean, even when we started 3 or 4 years ago, it was more challenging to find female growers. But now I think a lot of the communities we're working in, they are starting to gain that access or at least find their way to us. So it's a work in progress and a priority, but certainly a challenge. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. There's also a question to John about whether the tree planters, if they build their own nurseries and if they receive incentives for doing so, and the extent of your involvement.
Yeah, again, a really good question. So part of why the last few years where we've been experimenting with a wide range of projects, we're not just looking at environments, but we're looking at different types of partnerships or dynamics, community dynamics. So we work with some partners like CBOs, community-based organizations on the ground that might already have their own nurseries. In 1 or 2 cases, we were able to get funding ahead of time so that a group that we had a lot of confidence in could actually set up a nursery and grow trees. Our ultimate hope is that, our goal is to really have growers that are able to develop kind of their own tree growing enterprises. So whether that's a small scale nursery in their backyard or on their farm, or actually going out in the landscape and regenerating trees that are occurring naturally, or direct seeding plants. We're trying to enable all kinds of planting interventions, and ideally it's more on a pay per performance basis. So it's like we want to be able to fund is only the number of trees that are actually being planted, versus just kind of there's a lot of inefficiencies in the way that the industry's been working up until this point. So trying to provide an alternative to that.
Really interesting, thank you. Burhan, I'm going to throw 2 questions to you.
Sure.
One is, I think, relevant for all of our case studies, but a very pressing issue when it comes to digital solutions and the use of data. So who actually has access to the data that you generate, and does it ever fall into, or is there a risk of it falling into the wrong hands? And if so, how do you manage that? And the second, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we actually are. This is a extremely high priority for us because our platform RBMON has over 118 million recordings on it. By far the largest soundscape library in the world, perhaps even in history. So we have almost a petabyte of data on our servers, and these Guardian devices could fall into the wrong hands, for example, loggers or anybody else. So what we do is we encrypt the data as we transfer it. The data that's on the device itself gets encrypted, and we ensure that even if somebody gained access to these hardware devices, they wouldn't be able to access the data itself. And once the data is stored on the cloud, it's actually bucketized and it's private to the landowners or the project owners themselves. So although we have the ability to make your data public, and the Arbimon platform where lots of the users do acoustic analysis, they can make the data public. It is by their explicit consent to do that. So they can choose to make the data public. Otherwise, it would be kept private. So we take all sorts of measures to ensure that the privacy of data is there, and we give the capability to the user, to the partner, that the project owner to decide whether to make the data public or not.
Thank you so much. So the second question, Burhan, to you was, what kind of supports do the communities on the ground have when responding to the alerts that they receive from the devices?
Yeah, that's another great question. It varies greatly. There is no sort of rule of thumb on what the support looks like. It varies significantly from one community to another. Some communities get the help of police, and when they go on patrol, the police goes with them. Other communities get zero help, and they organize everything themselves. There's communities that are supported by a strong organization, for example, that would work through the intricacies of legal battles or anything like that that could result from this, or if they want to use the data from the Guardian devices as forensic evidence. So it varies greatly. And it really depends on where the community is and sort of the amount of support that they have.
Thank you so much. Okay, I see that there are more questions, but in the interest of time, we're just going to move on, and we can perhaps connect questions in the chats with some of the speakers as well, so you can continue your conversation separately. Now, I want to very briefly flag, so we had planned to share a word cloud with you with the results that we had. If there's time at the very end, then we will. But if not, we can share it with you on the presentation that we circulate. In the meantime, I would like to hand over to Xiaoting, who's going to tell us a little bit more about some upcoming opportunities that may be of interest to those of you joining.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks everyone, all the speakers. It was amazing. It was really great to hear those inspiring stories from the ground. And thanks, Anna, for giving me the slot despite the short time. I just really quickly just want to mention, please, next slide, REDAA, that you have already heard from several people mentioning REDAA. It stands for Reversing Environmental Degradation in Africa and Asia. And it's a program funded by UK aid and then managed by IED, International Institute for Environment and Development, where I work. And then next slide, please. So we heard so many great stories from the ground, and everyone's emphasizing that we must enable and fund the locally led actions. It's really important to put those local rural communities at the driving seat, even when we're deploying digital technology. And that's exactly what REDAA want to support and fund more. So we are aiming to support locally led research to action initiatives in 3 regions: Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, to help both people and nature thrive in this changing climate. And we'll do that through a series of competitive grants, which I'll give you a little bit more information. But next slide, please. But before that, I just want to say that really all gratitude towards GSMA team for leading this research, and all the speakers of, it's not just speaking today, but really working with us, providing us with those inspirations that derived all those really great recommendations that have been able to help us shape some of the early scoping work REDAA also funded, which includes a digital symposium, the virtual symposium co-organized with Royal Academy of Engineering Frontier Symposium on digital tools for reverse environmental degradation, and all those wonderful lessons have also informed the 4 seed funded project happening in Asia and Africa. Next slide, please. So we do encourage everyone on this call and webinar to also look into what we're funding next. So the first funding call will open on the 14th of June, and we're really interested in locally led initiatives and project ideas from the 3 regions I just mentioned. So do go to REDAA's website, and we will have a webinar on the 20th June to give you more information on the grant call. But most of the information actually is on the website, and then the webinar will help you answer some of your queries if you don't find the answers on our website. So with that, I'll hand back to Anna. And thanks everyone again for your excellent work and contributions.
Thank you so much, Jing. So I just wanted to end with a reflection that in our report, we outlined some of the best practices that we identified in creating digital solutions for natural resource management. So they spoke to a lot of the core principles that were highlighted through the case studies that we heard about earlier. And really it's the principles of co-creation, looking how you can reward end users, finding ways to partner with local organizations for maximum impact, and above all else, making sure that you know, the local communities are really at the heart and the center of all of the design. In the report, we also outline 5 recommended steps for anyone thinking about creating a digital solution from scratch. So all the way from the initial inception through to co-design, testing and learning. And for us, as a next step with this particular piece of work, we want to put these recommended steps into practice. And we want to be developing a toolkit to help people who are hoping to create a digital solution and helping them to maximize the uptake and impact of digital tools. So if you are interested in working with us and testing some of these ideas that we have, whether that's if you're a practitioner or a tech organization or also from academia, please do get in touch with either me or Layla on the details below, and we'd love to have some further conversations with you. And finally, just a huge thank you to FCDO for funding this initiative. Thank you to all the speakers for sharing your insights and your experience. And thanks to everyone else for joining the session as well and sharing your questions and your thoughts too. So I hope you found it useful, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.